Chapter 8. Shattered Connections. Darkness enveloped Lyra as she descended deeper into Pyreholm's forgotten underworld. The ancient catacombs stretched before her, corridors branching like arteries through the volcanic bedrock that had cradled the city for centuries. Her small mage light, carefully modulated to avoid detection from potential searchers above, cast eerie shadows against walls lined with niches where generations of fire mages had been laid to final rest.
7 turns left, 3 right, then the passage marked with twin flame sigils,
she murmured, recalling Zara's hurried instructions. The air grew increasingly dense with each step deeper into the burial complex, heavy with minerals and something less tangible, the accumulated presence of countless souls who had returned to the eternal flame. Lyra paused at an intersection, consulting the crude map Zara had sketched from her mother's research notes. The pathway ahead split into 3 identical tunnels, each disappearing into oppressive blackness beyond her mage light's reach. Nothing in the hasty drawings indicated which would lead to the chamber they had designated as temporary sanctuary.
Logic, not panic,
she reminded herself, studying the stonework around each entrance. The leftmost passage bore subtle scoring that suggested more frequent use, worn smooth by the passage of bodies over centuries of ritual interment. The central tunnel showed similar wear, though less pronounced. The rightmost path remained rough-hewn, its edges still crisp despite their apparent age.
The least traveled path,
Lyra decided, turning toward the rightmost tunnel.
Perfect for hiding what shouldn't be found.
As she ventured deeper, the very quality of darkness seemed to change, becoming denser, more substantial, as if the absence of light had acquired weight and texture. The air carried scents of ancient stone and ceremonial herbs used in burial rites, underlaid with the faint mineral tang of volcanic activity far below. The tunnel eventually opened into a circular chamber that matched Zara's description, a forgotten ritual space from Pyreholm's earliest days, its walls inscribed with primitive flame patterns that predated modern guild formalization. Stone benches arranged in concentric circles surrounded a central fire basin long cold, but still structurally intact.
This will serve,
Lyra concluded, setting down her small pack of essential supplies. The space offered both security from detection and basic comforts for temporary habitation. More importantly, its position deep within the catacombs made it virtually undetectable to conventional magical searches from above. She began establishing minimal living arrangements, unrolling the thin sleeping pallet, arranging water and food stores for maximum duration, setting protective wards at the chamber's entrance that would alert her to approaching presence without revealing her location to casual detection. Only when these practical necessities were addressed did Lyra allow herself a moment to truly absorb her changed circumstances. She was, for all practical purposes, dead to the world above. Her father would be receiving news of her spectacular demise. Guild officials would be investigating the apparent magical catastrophe. And Alek would be calculating, analyzing, perhaps even dissecting the necklace itself in an attempt to understand what had transpired. His apparent grief would conceal furious assessment of how his carefully laid plans had been disrupted. The thought should have terrified her, Yet she found unexpected calm in this new perspective gained through temporary death and subsequent rebirth into changed circumstances.
I've actually done it,
She whispered to the silent chamber, the words carrying weight beyond their simple syllables.
broken free.
The achievement warranted celebration, yet something vital seemed absent from this moment of triumph. Lyra reached into her pocket, withdrawing the moon opal that had maintained connection with Cassius throughout recent ordeals. Its surface remained cool against her palm, yet the gentle pulse that had provided constant reassurance had fallen silent.
Cassius?
She whispered, focusing her awareness toward the connection they had established in the Ember Sanctuary. Where constant background presence had previously hummed just beneath conscious perception, now only silence responded. The link between them, so vital during recent events, seemed to have vanished completely. Alarm surged through her as she concentrated more intensely on the stone, directing her magic into its crystalline structure with deliberate purpose. Still nothing. No response, no acknowledgement. Not even the faintest echo of the resonance they had established.
It's the catacombs,
She realized, glancing at the chamber walls with sudden understanding.
all these centuries of accumulated soul energy.
The realization brought both relief and frustration. The very feature that made these ancient depths perfect hiding place from magical detection also created an impenetrable barrier to the subtle connection she had relied upon for reassurance. Lyra paced the circular chamber, moon opal clutched tightly in her palm as she assessed implications of this unexpected complication. The connection hadn't been severed, merely blocked by ambient spiritual interference too dense for their relatively new bond to penetrate. Cassius would likely reach a similar conclusion when he noticed the disruption, though without knowledge of her specific location.
He'll inform Zara through their established communication channel.
She reasoned aloud, the sound of her voice providing comfort in the oppressive silence.
And she'll explain when she arrives.
This logical assessment provided temporary reassurance, yet couldn't completely dispel growing uneasiness as hours passed without Zara's appearance. They had established a precise timetable during hasty planning. Zara should have arrived shortly after the initial chaos following her death had subsided, bringing additional supplies and updated information about responses above. As the hours stretched with only darkness and silence for company, Lyra found her thoughts returning repeatedly to that dream encounter with Cassius, the connection that had transcended physical distance to create shared experience beyond normal limitations. The memory carried emotional resonance that deepened with each recollection. Aspects previously overlooked emerging with new significance upon reflection. It hadn't merely been physical attraction or intellectual compatibility, though both existed in undeniable measure. Something more fundamental had aligned between them. Recognition that transcended conscious decision to create connection. Neither had anticipated, yet both had embraced with surprising immediacy.
Could it actually work?
She whispered to the empty chamber, giving voice to a question that had lurked beneath practical considerations and immediate threats. Could a fire magister and spirit seer find lasting connection beyond the current crisis? Could elements traditionally considered opposed actually complement each other in a sustainable relationship rather than momentary alliance? The uncertainty carried equal parts trepidation and possibility. Fear of investing emotional significance in a temporary alignment balanced against glimpsed potential for connection beyond anything her arranged match with Alek could have provided. Not merely absence of manipulation, but presence of authentic resonance. Not simply freedom from control, but possibility of genuine partnership. Cassius had never attempted to direct or contain her abilities, had demonstrated consistent respect for her agency even when offering assistance, had willingly sacrificed a portion of his own soul to protect her without demand for acknowledgement or reciprocation. Everything Alek fundamentally lacked, expressed through actions rather than empty words or calculated gestures. As these reflections occupied her consciousness, Lyra found herself imagining possibilities beyond current circumstances. A future where such connection might develop without crisis driving every interaction, where shared discovery rather than desperate survival might guide their exploration of what existed between them.
First survive, then thrive,
She reminded herself, returning attention to immediate concerns rather than distant possibilities. Zara's continued absence represented a practical problem requiring immediate address rather than romantic speculation, warranting extended consideration. The original plan had anticipated potential delay, establishing an alternative timeline if the primary rendezvous failed. Lyra would wait 12 hours for Zara's arrival before implementing the contingency approach, relocating to a secondary position deeper within catacombs, then using a specific exit route to safely reach an alternative contact point where communication might be re-established. She checked her small timepiece. 11 hours had passed since her arrival in the ritual chamber. 1 more hour before the contingency activation became necessary. The moon opal remained silent in her palm, its cool surface providing physical comfort despite the continued absence of magical connection.
Where are you, Zara?
She whispered to the darkness, concern growing with each passing minute.
What's happening up there?
Zara Cinderkin maintained perfect composure as guild guards escorted her through Pyreholm's administrative quarter toward the investigation chambers. Her wrists bore ceremonial restraints, enchanted copper bands that disrupted magical access without causing physical discomfort. Standard protocol for questioning rather than formal accusation. Around them, the city continued processing news of Lyra Embersong's spectacular death with a mixture of public mourning and macabre fascination.
In here, Magister Cinderkin.
The senior guard directed, gesturing toward an interrogation room designed for magical practitioners. The space featured specific dampening enchantments that prevented access to external power sources while allowing contained workings under controlled observation. Security balanced against dignity, typically afforded guild-ranked mages. Zara entered without protest, taking position at the central table with deliberate calm that revealed nothing of her internal calculation. She had anticipated potential questioning given her close association with Lyra, had prepared reasonable responses that would satisfy the investigation without revealing actual circumstances. What she hadn't expected was the specific individual awaiting her inside,
Lord Brightforge?
She acknowledged with appropriate formality, masking genuine alarm beneath diplomatic composure.
I wasn't aware you would be conducting this interview personally.
Alek Brightforge stood by the chamber's single window, copper gold hair catching afternoon light in a way that created the brief impression of actual flames dancing around his head. His expression conveyed a perfect balance of grief and determined composure. The grieving fiancé, channeling personal pain into finding answers about his beloved's tragic fate.
Magister Cinderkin,
He replied, turning to face her fully.
thank you for your cooperation during this difficult time. I assure you this is merely preliminary information gathering, not formal interrogation.
His golden eyes studied her with intensity that belied the reassuring words. Predatory assessment beneath courteous exterior. Zara maintained a neutral expression despite recognizing the dangerous reality beneath procedural appearance. This wasn't a standard investigation, but a targeted inquiry from the very individual they had sought to deceive.
Of course.
She replied with appropriate solemnity.
Anything that might help understand today's tragic events.
Alek gestured for the guards to withdraw, waiting until the door closed behind them before speaking again.
Let's dispense with theatrical pretense, shall we?
His voice changed subtly, warmth replaced by calculating precision.
You were the last person to see Lyra alive before her unfortunate encounter with whatever emerged from that necklace.
The directness confirmed Zara's worst fears. This wasn't routine questioning, but a focused assessment from someone harboring specific suspicions. She maintained her composure through practiced discipline, her expression revealing appropriate grief without defensive agitation that might suggest guilty knowledge.
I assisted with her morning preparations, as I have frequently since our academy days.
She replied, technical truth that revealed nothing of their actual activities.
She seemed preoccupied, but otherwise normal. Understandable given the recent ceremonial demands.
Indeed.
Alek moved from the window to the table, placing between them Lyra's necklace.
Most interesting craftsmanship. Ancient containment sigils combined with more modern stabilization patterns, almost as if designed specifically for controlling powerful entities.
The observation carried dangerous implication. Zara directed her response toward procedural clarification, rather than defensive explanation.
I wouldn't know,
She said with appropriate academic interest that masked internal alarm.
I specialize in diplomatic applications rather than artifacts. Has the investigation identified what exactly caused the incident?
Alek studied her with unsettling intensity, golden eyes seemingly attempting to extract truth through sheer focused will.
The investigation continues,
He replied after a measured pause.
though certain aspects remain puzzling. The necklace itself appears undamaged despite the catastrophic release of whatever entity it apparently contained.
Magical objects often survive forces that destroy organic material.
Zara observed, the scholarly comment designed to suggest professional distance rather than intimate knowledge.
Basic principle of enchanted metallurgy.
Indeed.
Alek's fingers traced the necklace's edge with deliberate precision.
Another puzzle? How such a dangerous entity remained dormant during weeks of Lyra wearing the necklace, only to suddenly manifest with such destructive focus.
The question targeted precisely what Zara couldn't explain without revealing their deception. She shifted approach slightly, introducing element of emotional distraction to divert from logical inconsistency.
We may never know exact circumstances.
She said, allowing genuine grief for her friend's situation to color her voice despite knowing Lyra remained alive.
I still cannot believe she's actually gone. Just yesterday, we were discussing the flame blessing ritual and how it would enhance your eventual union.
The reference to their successful postponement strategy registered in Alek's expression. A brief flash of something dark beneath grief's careful mask.
Yes.
He acknowledged, momentary tension suggesting this particular memory carried complicated associations.
Her dedication to traditional enhancement methods was unexpected.
Lyra always valued perfection in magical applications.
Zara replied, building a protective narrative around known facts while avoiding specific fabrications that might later prove contradictory.
Even temporary inconvenience seemed worthwhile if it promised an enhanced ultimate result.
Alek's eyes narrowed slightly at this characterization, perhaps recognizing the description's accuracy while questioning whether it truly explained recent behavior.
Your friendship granted you unique insight into her thinking.
He acknowledged, though the compliment carried an undertone of suspicion rather than appreciation.
Which makes your perspective particularly valuable regarding her final days.
The phrasing sent a chill through Zara despite the room's comfortable temperature. Not merely routine questioning, but focused investigation from someone who potentially suspected deception without yet possessing confirming evidence. A dangerous position requiring carefully calibrated response that neither confirmed suspicious patterns nor contradicted verifiable facts.
I wish I had recognized something, anything that might have prevented today's tragedy.
She replied, threading genuine emotion through carefully constructed response.
But there was nothing unusual in her demeanor beyond normal stresses accompanying the engagement preparations.
Nothing unusual.
Alek repeated, each syllable carrying subtle emphasis suggesting skepticism without direct accusation.
Not even regarding her interactions with the spirit seer?
The question revealed specific direction of his suspicion. A connection between Lyra and Cassius apparently hadn't escaped his notice despite their attempts at discretion. Zara maintained a neutral expression through practiced discipline, considering a response that would acknowledge known interactions without revealing deeper significance.
Magister Nightshade?
She clarified, as if the reference required specification rather than carrying obvious implication.
His diplomatic assignment concluded yesterday. I believe he submitted the final report regarding the ancestral warning before departing for the Spirit Guild.
Yes, his formal assignment concluded.
Alek agreed, golden eyes never leaving her face as he studied her reaction.
Yet certain sources suggest continued communication beyond official capacity.
The revelation that he possessed specific intelligence rather than mere suspicion shifted the tactical landscape dramatically. Zara adjusted her approach accordingly, acknowledging verifiable facts while framing them within innocent context.
Lyra found his historical insights regarding ancestral manifestations academically interesting.
She acknowledged with appropriate casualness.
She mentioned possibly corresponding regarding certain ancient texts both had studied. Scholarly exchange rather than anything inappropriate.
Alek's expression revealed nothing beyond appropriate interest in a grieving fiancé seeking to understand his beloved's final activities. Yet something in his stillness suggested predatory assessment rather than emotional processing. A calculating mind behind a grieving exterior.
Of course.
He agreed after momentary silence.
Merely confirming all contacts during the investigation's standard procedures.
He gathered the necklace with a deliberate movement that somehow conveyed final judgment despite its innocuous nature.
One last question, if you'll permit. Where exactly were you during the marketplace incident?
The query targeted a potential coordination their plan had specifically anticipated. The reason they had maintained separation during the public spectacle. Zara had established a clear alibi with multiple witnesses, ensuring no suggestion of collaborative effort could be sustained through investigation.
Assisting Elder Kalina with the festival documentation,
She replied promptly.
the Eastern Administrative Complex houses at least a dozen official witnesses who can confirm my presence when the commotion began. I learned of the tragedy only after runners brought news from the marketplace.
The confirmation appeared to satisfy some internal checklist. Alek nodding once before rising with fluid grace that suggested a conclusion to their immediate discussion, if not his larger suspicions.
Thank you for your cooperation, Magister Cinderkin. Please remain available for potential follow-up questions as our investigation proceeds.
Of course,
Zara agreed, maintaining appropriate solemnity.
anything that helps understand what happened to my dearest friend.
Only as guild guards returned to escort her from the interrogation chamber did Zara allow herself to recognize the full implications of this development. What had been planned as brief, routine questioning had revealed targeted investigation from the very individual their deceptions sought to mislead. More concerning still, her continued detention, however politely framed as remaining available, prevented her from reaching the catacombs where Lyra waited without explanation for her delayed arrival. The carefully choreographed plan had encountered its first significant disruption. Communications severed where coordination remained essential. Isolation imposed where connection had been fundamental component of their strategy. As she followed her escorts toward holding chambers designated for cooperative witnesses, Zara's mind raced through contingency options, calculating probabilities, and reassessing tactical approaches as circumstances evolved beyond initial predictions. Most concerning of all, if Alek harbored such specific suspicions regarding Cassius's connection to Lyra, had he already directed similar investigative attention toward the spirit seer himself? The possibility sent a cold ripple of alarm through her otherwise composed exterior. Without warning about Lyra's staged death, how would Cassius interpret the news of her apparent demise? The Spirit Guild's Eastern Sanctuary normally provided a perfect environment for contemplative work. Its crystal-lined walls filtering sunlight into gentle illumination that supported concentration without causing distraction. Its carefully maintained atmosphere balancing humidity and temperature for optimal comfort during extended meditation sessions. Yet Cassius found himself unable to settle into a proper focus despite these ideal conditions. Something felt wrong. A discordant note in an otherwise harmonious resonance he had maintained with Lyra since their sanctuary working. The connection had remained consistently present despite physical separation. Background awareness providing reassurance without intrusion. Until suddenly, without warning or gradual diminishment, it had simply vanished.
Focus, not panic.
He reminded himself, adjusting his meditation posture for a fifth attempt at establishing contact. The moon opal's counterpart rested on a small pedestal before him, its surface catching the sanctuary light with a subtle luminescence that shifted between silver and pale blue depending on viewing angle. He directed his consciousness toward the stone with practiced precision, extending awareness beyond physical limitations into the halfway realm, where spirit connections formed their delicate bridges between separated individuals. Nothing. Where familiar resonance had previously guided his spiritual perception directly to Lyra's distinctive magical signature, now only emptiness responded. Absence rather than presence. Void rather than connection. The experience carried disturbing similarity to searching for a soul that had departed physical form completely, though he rejected this interpretation through logical assessment rather than emotional denial.
Interference rather than termination.
He concluded aloud, the spoken words helping organize scattered thoughts despite being alone in the sanctuary.
Disruption rather than destruction.
Several potential explanations existed for a sudden connection loss, ranging from mundane distance effects to targeted magical interference. Cassius had anticipated potential communication challenges following his return to the Spirit Guild headquarters. They had established alternative channels through Zara, precisely because direct contact might prove unreliable across significant separation. Yet his attempts to reach their mutual friend through these backup methods had also failed. Messages sent, but unacknowledged. Inquiries delivered, but unanswered. This concurrent communication failure suggested coordinated disruption rather than random interference, pattern rather than coincidence. Rising from the meditation position with fluid grace that belied growing internal agitation, Cassius moved to a sanctuary window overlooking the Spirit Guild's mist-shrouded grounds. The serene landscape normally provided calming influence during troubled contemplation, yet today its peaceful aspect seemed an inappropriate counterpoint to his increasingly urgent concern.
Something has happened.
He stated with quiet certainty, violet eyes scanning the horizon as if physical distance might somehow become visible to determined observation. Not scheduled communication lapse, but unexpected development, significant enough to disrupt multiple contact methods simultaneously, substantial enough to warrant immediate investigation rather than patient waiting. Decision crystallized with characteristic clarity once his logical assessment had been completed. Not impulse, but methodical conclusion based on available evidence and calculated probability. The distance between Spirit Guild headquarters and Pyreholm represented the primary obstacle to direct intervention. A journey requiring days through conventional travel methods that current circumstances suggested might prove a critically delayed response. An alternative existed, though attempting it carried significant risk, even for an experienced spirit seer. Transcendental transition, a magical transportation technique combining spirit walking with a physical manifestation, allowing a consciousness to travel spectral pathways while carrying the physical form in a suspended state between material existence and spiritual manifestation. A technique restricted to master practitioners due to the substantial energy requirements and the potential for catastrophic failure if executed improperly. Cassius had achieved the necessary theoretical qualification for such working, had studied the required methodologies with comprehensive attention to technical details, yet had never attempted actual implementation beyond controlled practice sessions under elder supervision. Attempting unsupervised transition across significant distance represented a considerable risk, even under ideal circumstances, let alone with an emotional concern potentially affecting necessary precision. Yet the alternative, conventional travel while connection remained severed and circumstances unknown, seemed increasingly unacceptable, as minutes stretched without restored contact. The fragment of his consciousness still residing within the necklace should have maintained the connection regardless of the physical separation, unless something had fundamentally changed regarding the artifact itself or Lyra's relationship to it.
Preparation, not haste.
He reminded himself, beginning methodical arrangement of the protective measures necessary for attempting such an advanced working. Spirit anchors positioned at cardinal points around the sanctuary's central platform. Crystalline focus aligned with destination coordinates. Personal essence distilled into a temporary anchor that would prevent complete separation during transition. When physical preparations had been completed to exacting standards, Cassius settled into the transitional posture at the platform's center. Body relaxed, yet precisely positioned for optimal energy flow. Consciousness simultaneously grounded in his material form, yet expanded toward the spectral pathways that existed alongside physical reality. The working required perfect balance between opposites, presence and absence, material and immaterial, stasis and movement, coexisting in harmonious tension rather than contradictory opposition.
Find the path through balanced awareness rather than forced direction.
He murmured, reciting master-level instruction that had been theoretical knowledge until this moment of practical application.
Perceive the connection between destinations as already existing, rather than requiring creation.
His consciousness expanded outward, violet eyes clouding with deep spirit sight as perception shifted from physical limitations toward spectral awareness. The world transformed around him, solid objects becoming translucent, ephemeral energies gaining substance, pathways invisible to ordinary sight manifesting as luminous threads connecting distant locations through a metaphysical landscape beyond conventional understanding. Focusing on specific memories of Pyreholm, the Ember Sanctuary, where their connection had first formed, the diplomatic chambers where formal interaction had occurred, the garden shed where momentary privacy had created possibility without fulfillment. Cassius identified the glowing strand that connected his current location with his intended destination, not creating a transit method, but recognizing existing connection previously unperceived through limited awareness. The transition began with a gentle tug that rapidly intensified into an overwhelming pull as his consciousness aligned with the identified pathway. Physical sensation paradoxically combined the impression of absolute stillness with incredible velocity, his body remaining motionless while awareness traveled between locations with impossible speed. Reality blurred around him, material existence temporarily suspended as spectral translation transported both consciousness and physical form along a metaphysical current connecting separate destinations. Disorientation peaked with a sudden, jarring return to complete physicality. The sanctuary's cultivated perfection replaced by a modest garden alcove within Pyreholm's eastern quarter. The transition completed successfully despite its unprecedented nature, delivering him precisely to the location he had visualized with such focused intensity during the preparation phase. Cassius required several moments to reorient following such extreme magical exertion, his body protesting the sudden displacement with trembling limbs and disordered senses that gradually restabilized as normal perception reasserted itself. Success tempered by recognition of significant energy depletion that would require a substantial recovery period before any further major magical working could be safely attempted. When physical equilibrium had been sufficiently restored, he activated a partial concealment working, not complete invisibility, but subtle diversion of attention that would prevent casual observation while allowing intentional interaction when necessary. The enhancement required minimal energy while providing essential privacy for his unsanctioned presence within Fire Guild territory. Move in with careful purpose despite lingering physical weakness, Cassius navigated from his arrival point toward Pyreholm's central district, where information might be gathered without drawing undue attention. The connection with Lyra remained stubbornly absent, despite his physical proximity that should have strengthened their established resonance, suggesting interference beyond simple distance effect or temporary disruption. His progress halted abruptly as he encountered an unexpected commotion spilling from the central marketplace into surrounding streets. Crowd gathered around a location that appeared to be under active investigation by guild authorities. The scene generated emotional intensity that registered clearly even to his disrupted spiritual perception. Shock, horror, morbid fascination radiating from the assembled witnesses discussing events with animated gestures and expressions.
What happened?
He asked a nearby citizen. Partial concealment adjusted to allow direct interaction while maintaining general anonymity.
What's occurring at the marketplace?
The middle-aged woman turned with a startled expression that quickly shifted to morbid eagerness, typical of those possessing dramatic news others might not yet know.
Terrible accident,
She explained, voice lowered despite the obvious desire to share the spectacular information.
or attack, some are saying. The High Councilor's daughter, destroyed right in the middle of morning market.
The words landed with physical impact, momentarily disrupting Cassius's careful composure, despite years of disciplined emotional control.
Destroyed?
He repeated, voice maintaining remarkable steadiness despite internal upheaval her casual phrasing had initiated.
What exactly do you mean?
Consumed by a fire spirit.
The woman elaborated, clearly enjoying her role as information provider despite tragedy being reported.
Witnesses saw it emerge from a necklace she was wearing, take humanoid form with burning eyes and horns, then engulf her completely. Nothing left but ashes and that cursed necklace.
Each detail struck with increasing force as its significance registered against knowledge others didn't possess. Not a random accident, but a specific pattern matching the exact entity he had encountered within the necklace's realm. Not a general magical catastrophe, but a precisely targeted destruction, focused exclusively on Lyra herself.
When did this happen?
He asked, voice still remarkably controlled despite growing internal chaos her revelation had created.
Mid-morning,
She replied, glancing toward Marketplace where investigation continued with methodical thoroughness.
guild officials have been examining everything since it happened. Lord Brightforge himself is overseeing the investigation. He arrived just after it happened, poor man. His bride-to-be killed right before their wedding.
The timing aligned precisely with the connection's sudden severance. Not a coincidence, but a direct causation. Not a temporary disruption, but a permanent termination. The logical conclusion stood unmistakable despite emotional resistance that arose with unprecedented force against its acceptance. Lyra was gone. Their connection hadn't merely been disrupted, it had been severed by death itself.
Thank you.
He managed, composure maintained through sheer disciplined will despite fundamental upheaval occurring beneath this controlled exterior. The woman nodded before turning back to the continuing spectacle, leaving Cassius momentarily frozen between knowledge and acceptance, between logical conclusion and emotional resistance. Moving with automatic precision that required no conscious direction, he navigated away from crowded streets toward quieter location where processing might occur without observation. The green arbor provided the necessary sanctuary, its winding paths and secluded alcoves offering privacy within a common space, its careful design preventing easy observation of individuals seeking momentary solitude among cultivated nature. Only when a suitable location had been secured did Cassius allow his carefully maintained composure to yield to the emotional reality of what he had learned. Not complete collapse. His discipline remained too ingrained for such abandonment, but controlled acknowledgement of the impact these revelations carried beyond intellectual assessment. The necklace's entity had somehow broken containment his fragment had established, had manifested physically rather than merely metaphysically, had consumed Lyra in spectacular fashion that left no possibility of survival. His protection had failed despite sacrifice intended to prevent exactly this outcome. His absence from a crucial moment, allowing catastrophe where his presence might have enabled intervention.
It cannot be.
He whispered. Words directed not to present reality, but to a deeper understanding that transcended the physical evidence and logical conclusion. Something fundamentally refused acceptance despite compelling evidence and eyewitness accounts. Certainty beyond rational justification that contradicted apparent facts without offering alternative explanation. The moon opal remained silent in his pocket, its connection severed alongside Lyra's apparent death. But far more damning was the sudden, overwhelming rush of energy that flooded his consciousness without warning, his soul fragment returning to him in a disorienting surge of memories and awareness. Cassius staggered, bracing himself against a nearby tree as the fragment reintegrated with his primary consciousness. The implications were undeniable. The fragment would only return upon the necklace's destruction or Lyra's death. There was no other way it could break free from its binding within the fire opal.
She's gone.
He whispered, certainty replacing desperate denial as the fragment's memories washed through him.
Truly gone.
The fragment carried final impressions, chaos, heat, dissolution, before its connection had been violently severed. Not the controlled release that would have occurred had Lyra somehow removed the necklace safely, but catastrophic disruption consistent with witnesses' accounts of her fiery destruction. His analytical mind, usually so disciplined, failed to find alternative explanations that could withstand this devastating evidence. The soul fragment's return was the final confirmation he hadn't wanted, but could no longer deny.
I must find her.
Cassius decided, a new determination replacing his initial shock. Spirit seers possessed a unique capacity to perceive souls beyond material constraints, to locate specific consciousness within the spectral landscape, regardless of physical separation. If Lyra had perished as all evidence suggested, her soul would have transitioned to a spectral existence where his trained perception could potentially locate and reconnect with her essence. The thought of her spirit adrift in the vastness of the spectral domains, possibly confused or frightened by the sudden transition, drove him forward with single-minded purpose. He would find her soul, guide it if necessary, perhaps even communicate one last time, a chance to express what had remained unspoken between them. The working required a deep trance state far beyond normal meditation. Consciousness projection into dangerous territories few spirit mages willingly explored without extensive preparation and protection. Attempting such journey following the transcendental transition that had already depleted significant magical reserves represented substantial risk to his own well-being, potentially trapping his projected consciousness beyond his physical form's capacity to sustain the connection. Yet the alternative, accepting death without absolute confirmation, seemed unacceptable given what had developed between them. Not merely professional collaboration or temporary alliance, but something his carefully disciplined emotional framework struggled to properly categorize despite its undeniable significance.
Worth any risk?
He acknowledged quietly, settling into the position appropriate for consciousness projection within the garden alcove's relative protection. The working began with careful preparation despite its fundamentally dangerous nature. Protective boundaries established, energy pathways optimized, spiritual anchors secured to his physical form before his consciousness extended beyond material limitations, into realms where death held absolute dominion. His awareness expanded outward, beyond physical constraints into territories where departed souls transitioned following bodily death. Not final destination, but temporary passage. The in-between realms where spirit seers could sometimes make contact with those recently departed before their ultimate transition beyond even magical reach. If Lyra's soul had indeed been released through physical destruction, some trace would remain detectable within these transitional spaces. Deeper and deeper his consciousness traveled, pushing beyond safe territories into increasingly dangerous realms, where spiritual predators hunted unwary travelers and disoriented souls alike. Yet no sign of Lyra's distinctive signature appeared. No trace of her unique resonance registered, despite his expanding awareness across the hazardous spiritual landscape.
She should be here.
He whispered into the void, confusion giving way to distress. Souls recently severed from physical forms always left traces in these transitional realms. Her absence made no sense unless... The tiny timepiece in Lyra's hand ticked forward with merciless precision, marking the final moments before the 12-hour deadline elapsed. Zara's absence had stretched from concerning to alarming contingency plans now hovering at the edge of necessary activation. The catacomb chamber remained eerily silent, save for the quiet sound of her own breathing and the timepiece's relentless progress.
Something's gone wrong,
She murmured, closing the timepiece with a decisive snap as the final minute expired. The original plan lay in tatters, Zara's failure to arrive suggesting complications above that hadn't been anticipated in their hasty preparations. Protocol dictated clear response. Relocate deeper into the catacombs. Activate the secondary hiding position. Wait for the alternative contact through predetermined channels. Prudent strategy designed to minimize risk while maintaining essential concealment from those who believed her dead. Yet something beyond logical assessment pulled at her consciousness. Intuition honed through years of precise magical control, suggesting an alternative approach despite its obvious dangers. Not merely frustrated impatience, but genuine concern for those left behind in her elaborate deception.
Waiting solves nothing if something has truly gone wrong.
She reasoned aloud, the sound of her voice providing an anchoring presence in the oppressive silence.
If Zara has been detained, if Cassius remains uninformed of our plan,
The moon opal remained silent in her palm, its usual gentle pulse completely absent within the catacombs' dense spiritual interference. Whatever connection it had maintained with Cassius's consciousness had been thoroughly blocked by centuries of accumulated soul energy surrounding her hiding place. Decision crystallized with surprising clarity. Not impulsive reaction, but calculated risk assessment. Waiting guaranteed continued ignorance of developments above. Action offered potential information acquisition despite increased exposure. The original plan had already failed through Zara's unexplained absence. Adaptation became necessary rather than optional.
illusion rather than concealment.
Lyra determined, mind already calculating the necessary magical parameters for a sustained disguise. Not attempting to hide her presence entirely, which would require prohibitive energy expenditure, but altering her perceived identity through a carefully constructed appearance modification. From her pack, she withdrew the materials necessary for the working. A small mirror for visual reference, binding threads to anchor the illusion physically rather than merely visually, stabilizing compounds that would maintain the constructed appearance without constant conscious reinforcement. A disguise crafted through her specialty, flame illusion so precisely controlled it could alter perceived reality without actual transformation. Lyra studied her reflection critically, identifying the essential elements requiring modification for effective concealment. Not merely changing coloration or superficial features, but fundamentally altering how others would perceive her presence. A transformation complete enough to withstand casual observation while remaining energetically sustainable.
Identity constructed through expectation as much as observation.
She reminded herself, beginning the careful weaving of illusory threads around her actual form. The working took shape with practiced precision. Flame manipulation so controlled it generated no heat, despite creating a visual reality indistinguishable from physical transformation. Where flame red hair had marked her instantly recognizable appearance, Now close-cropped brown locks framed a face subtly reshaped to suggest masculine rather than feminine features. Her height remained unchanged. That alteration would have required physical rather than illusory transformation. But posture shifted to present a different physical impression. Shoulders squared, stance widened to masculine proportions. The final touch transformed her distinctive amber eyes to common hazel. The Embersong lineage's most recognizable feature concealed beneath a constructed ordinariness that would draw no second glance from casual observers. Her age appeared younger through carefully adjusted facial proportions. An academy apprentice, rather than full magister. An unremarkable student, rather than the High Councilor's daughter. When the illusion reached completion, Lyra studied the result with critical assessment free from personal vanity. The disguise presented exactly what she had intended. An unremarkable young man of appropriate age for an advanced fire apprentice. Features suggesting common lineage rather than aristocratic breeding. An appearance drawing no particular attention while allowing free movement through public spaces.
Perfect anonymity.
She concluded with professional satisfaction. The binding threads would maintain the illusion's integrity without continuous conscious reinforcement, allowing her to navigate Pyreholm without constant magical exertion that might attract attention from more sensitive observers. Securing the necessary supplies for a surface excursion, Lyra departed the ritual chamber with determined focus that belied understandable anxiety regarding her first venture beyond safe concealment. The catacombs' winding passages seemed less confusing now that direction led toward the surface, rather than deeper concealment. Natural intuition guiding her path more effectively than conscious mapping had achieved during the initial descent. She selected her exit point carefully, a maintenance tunnel connecting ancient catacombs to newer construction, emerging in a service area where worker presence would appear entirely natural regardless of the hour. The disguise's final element, simple apprentice robes acquired before her staged death, completed the illusion of an unremarkable academy student, perhaps assigned menial duties as part of traditional training requirements. The transition from underground darkness to surface twilight momentarily disoriented her despite careful preparation, eyes adjusting to natural illumination after hours in magical light, senses expanding beyond confined spaces to embrace Pyreholm's familiar energy patterns. Sunset approached, casting long shadows across stone streets, still bustling with subdued activity following the day's dramatic events. Most surprising was the immediate response from the moon opal in her pocket. Its previously silent presence suddenly vibrating with unexpected intensity that nearly caused a physical gasp before she controlled her reaction. Not merely a restored connection, but an urgent communication, as if the stone itself recognized critical circumstances requiring immediate attention. More astonishing still, the connection it maintained felt unnervingly close. Not a distant link stretching across substantial separation, but a resonance suggesting physical proximity beyond any explanation her logical assessment could provide. The sensation felt exactly like standing near Cassius himself, though such possibility defied reasonable explanation considering his known location at Spirit Guild headquarters days of travel distant. Yet the opal's insistent pulse couldn't be dismissed as mere malfunction or wishful interpretation. Its message carried unmistakable direction, pulling her consciousness toward a specific location within Pyreholm with an urgency transcending normal communication. Following this guidance meant abandoning her original information-gathering objective, yet something in the stone's desperate resonance suggested priorities had shifted beyond her original planning. Decision made with characteristic decisiveness, Lyra adjusted course to follow the opal's increasingly urgent guidance. Its pull led away from central districts toward the eastern quarter, where gardens and meditation spaces provided respite from Pyreholm's constant activity. Specifically, she realized with growing confusion, toward the green arbor where her previous conversation with Cassius had occurred days earlier. The coincidence seemed too precise for random chance, yet its implications raised questions beyond immediate comprehension. The opal's vibration intensified as she approached the garden's entrance, its cool surface now almost painfully active against her palm, as if straining towards something just beyond immediate perception. Evening had driven most visitors from the garden's winding paths, leaving peaceful solitude that would normally provide a perfect atmosphere for contemplative walks or quiet conversation. Yet something in the air itself felt wrong. Magic disturbed beyond normal parameters, energy patterns shifting in ways that raised instinctive alarm in any trained practitioner. Following the opal's guidance with increasing urgency, Lyra navigated the familiar pathways toward a secluded alcove where a previous conversation with Cassius had occurred. The stone nearly burned with cold fire now, its magic straining towards something her ordinary senses couldn't yet perceive, but her magical awareness increasingly recognized as deeply wrong. The alcove appeared empty at first glance. Curved stone bench surrounded by flame-resistant foliage, designed to provide privacy for quiet contemplation. Yet, as her perception adjusted to deepening twilight, a figure gradually became visible, seated in a formal meditation posture, yet somehow wrong in ways that sent cold fear through her, despite controlled composure. Recognition struck with physical impact that momentarily halted breath in her lungs.
Cassius.
Impossible yet undeniable. The spirit seer sat motionless on the stone bench, violet eyes open yet seeing nothing of present reality. His body maintained in perfect meditation posture while appearing fundamentally untethered from normal existence. His skin held a translucent quality that should never characterize a living being, breathing so shallow it required magical perception to detect it all. The moon opal nearly leaped from her grasp, its magic straining toward its counterpart visible in Cassius's loosely curled fingers. The paired stones recognized each other across physical separation that their wielders currently transcended, their connection remaining active despite one participant's obvious detachment from material reality.
Spirit walking?
Lyra whispered, recognizing the dangerous technique from forbidden texts she had studied in secret. Not mere meditation, but consciousness projection into spiritual realms. Awareness traveling beyond physical limitations while the body remained in suspended animation, requiring precise return protocols to avoid permanent separation. Yet something had gone terribly wrong with this particular working. his physical form showing signs of dangerous overextension. The connection between body and projected consciousness stretched dangerously thin beyond safe parameters. Not controlled exploration, but desperate searching. Not disciplined practice, but reckless pursuit, regardless of personal cost.
You're looking for me.
She realized with dawning horror.
You heard about my death and you're searching the spirit realms for my soul.
The understanding carried terrible implications. His consciousness traveling increasingly dangerous territories, seeking what could not be found because it had never been lost. Each failure driving him deeper into realms no spirit seer willingly entered without extensive preparation and protection. His desperation overriding training and self-preservation alike.
How do I reach you?
She whispered. Magical training offering no immediate solution to crisis beyond her specialty's normal parameters. Illusion couldn't bridge a gap between material and spiritual realms. Couldn't reach a consciousness-traveling path she had no training to access or even properly perceive. The air around her suddenly cooled, pressure changing with subtle shift that registered through her magical senses rather than ordinary perception. Not a hostile presence, but a deliberate manifestation. Energy patterns organizing themselves into recognizable configuration that gradually assumed translucent human appearance. An elderly woman materialized beside the bench, her features carrying unmistakable Embersong characteristics, despite a translucent quality that identified her as spectral rather than physical presence. Her form wavered slightly, maintaining manifestation through obvious effort that suggested an importance transcending normal reluctance to bridge worlds without formal summoning.
Great-grandmother Ariana,
Lyra whispered. The spirit nodded once. Acknowledgement without wasted energy on unnecessary communication. Her translucent hand gestured toward Cassius's motionless form, then toward Lyra herself, the movement creating a connecting line between them that gradually became visible as golden thread linking their magical signatures across separation between conscious awareness and spiritual projection.
the connection we established.
Lyra understood immediately.
It remains viable despite his current state.
Ariana nodded again, approval warming her spectral features before she made another gesture. Hands pressed together, then slowly separating with threads still connecting them despite increasing distance. The demonstration required no verbal explanation, maintaining connection while allowing necessary separation. Tether without constraint. Link without limitation.
I can use our connection to call him back.
Lyra concluded, comprehension expanding with each moment of silent communication.
Guide his consciousness back to physical form without disrupting whatever spiritual working he's attempting.
A final nod from her ancestor, accompanied by a gesture toward the moon opal still clutched in Lyra's palm. The stone's connection to its counterpart in Cassius's possession created a physical anchor for a metaphysical working, a bridge between realms, accessible through a relationship already established rather than requiring a new pathway through unfamiliar territory. As Ariana's manifestation gradually faded, maintaining physical appearance requiring energy she clearly wished to conserve, Lyra moved to kneel before Cassius's motionless form. The illusion disguising her appearance dissolved with conscious dismissal. unnecessary pretense abandoned in favor of authentic presence that might register more effectively across spiritual boundaries.
How do I even begin?
She wondered aloud, her magical training offering limited guidance for situation beyond normal parameters. Spirit walking remained technically forbidden knowledge within Fire Guild education. Communication between realms was considered a dangerous practice reserved for those with specific training and preparation. Intuition provided direction where formal education lacked specific instruction. The connection they had established in the Ember Sanctuary remained accessible through focused intention, rather than elaborate ritual. That working had created a resonance between their magical signatures that transcended normal limitations. Harmony that remained viable despite current separation between consciousness and physical form. Settling into position mirroring his meditation posture, Lyra closed her eyes and directed awareness toward the connection she could still sense, despite its currently attenuated state. Not forcing response, but inviting recognition. Not commanding return, but offering guidance. Her approach fundamentally different from traditional fire magic's directive technique.
Cassius.
She called, voice pitched to carry through metaphysical distance rather than merely physical separation.
Follow my voice back through our connection.
The moon opal warmed in her palm, its surface glowing with gentle illumination that gradually synchronized with its counterparts still clutched in his rigid fingers. The paired stones recognized each other across boundaries their wielders currently navigated, their connection providing an anchor for a consciousness stretched dangerously thin across incompatible realms.
Cassius,
she called again, directing her consciousness along the golden thread Ariana had made visible between them.
I'm here, alive. Follow our connection back to physical reality.
Somewhere beyond perception accessible to ordinary senses, something responded. A faint recognition like distant echo returning from an extreme depth. Acknowledgement without conscious comprehension. His projected consciousness registered her call without understanding its source or significance. Awareness too distant from material reality to process information beyond instinctive response to familiar resonance. Lyra deepened her focus, directing more energy into their established connection with careful precision that respected boundaries, while strengthening the bridge between separated aspects of his being. Not forcing a return, but illuminating pathway. Not demanding a response, but maintaining a consistent invitation that respected his agency while offering necessary guidance.
I need you to return,
she called, personal rather than merely practical concern coloring her communication.
Your physical form cannot sustain extended separation under these conditions.
Again, that distant response. Stronger now, recognition expanding beyond instinctive reaction to include dawning comprehension. Something within his far-traveling consciousness began active engagement with the connection she maintained between them. Tentative at first, then with increasing certainty, as familiarity recognized, despite contextual confusion. Within spectral territories unknown to living perception, Cassius Nightshade's projected consciousness registered an unexpected sensation amidst increasingly dangerous exploration. Not finding what he desperately sought, yet discovering something equally significant. a resonance recognized despite contextual incongruity, connection maintained despite circumstantial impossibility. His awareness shifted direction, following a golden thread now visible within the spiritual landscape where physical perception held no dominion. The path led away from the deepest territories where his desperate search had driven him, regardless of personal safety, upward toward realms more compatible with embodied existence, where connection to a physical form might be re-established under safer conditions. Yet danger remained despite directional correction. Shadow entities recognizing vulnerability in a traveling consciousness disconnected from its physical protection. Spiritual predators sensing potential sustenance in awareness, stretched thin across metaphysical distance. His return journey faced opposition beyond mere navigational challenge, requiring defensive capability already compromised through extended separation and depleted reserves. The connection provided more than mere guidance. Lyra's energy flowed along the established resonance to supplement his diminished capacity. Strength shared rather than merely direction indicated. Not dominating his return, but supporting necessary effort. Not replacing his agency, but enhancing available resources through willingly offered assistance.
I can feel you fighting your way back,
she whispered, her awareness expanding beyond normal limitations through their deepening connection.
What's pursuing you?
Her perception couldn't fully comprehend the entities existing within purely spiritual territories. Yet through their connection, she sensed the opposition he faced during his attempted return. A hungry awareness without material form. Ancient intelligences resenting intrusion into territories beyond living claim. Shadows seeking light to consume, regardless of consequence to either party. Instinctively, she directed additional energy along their connection. Flame essence normally employed for illusion, repurposed as illumination within spiritual darkness. Fire magic adapted to context beyond its traditional application. Not attacking directly, but creating a protective radiance. Not engaging hostile entities, but establishing boundaries they hesitated to transgress, despite their predatory nature. The assistance proved crucial as Cassius navigated the treacherous transition between deepest spiritual territories and intermediate realms, where reconnection became increasingly viable. Each step toward physical reality strengthened their connection, while simultaneously increasing his vulnerability to entities recognizing escape potential from potential prey. The opposition intensifying proportionally with proximity to successful return.
Almost there.
Lyra encouraged, her awareness expanding further as his consciousness approached the threshold between spiritual projection and physical reintegration.
Just follow our connection all the way back.
The final transition required precision beyond his exhausted capability. His consciousness recognizing the necessary pathway without retaining sufficient energy to complete the required navigation. The moment of greatest vulnerability arrived precisely when success seemed most imminent. A return pathway visible yet remaining just beyond his depleted capacity to traverse the final distance, separating spiritual existence from physical reintegration. Without conscious calculation, Lyra extended herself further along their connection than training or experience would normally permit. her awareness reaching beyond material limitations to provide a necessary bridge across the remaining separation. Not merely offering guidance, but becoming the pathway itself. Not simply illuminating the route, but transforming into a transition medium through which his return became possible despite his individual limitations. The moment of reintegration occurred with surprising gentleness despite its fundamental significance. Consciousness returning to physical form through gradual realignment rather than abrupt transition. His awareness recognized familiar boundaries of embodied existence. Spirit reconnecting with material constraints that paradoxically provided liberation from dangers plaguing purely spectral territories. Cassius's eyes cleared slowly, violet depth returning to irises previously clouded with spirit sight. Awareness gradually reoriented from spiritual landscapes to material reality. Consciousness recognizing physical limitations with a mixture of disappointment and relief that reflected the complex circumstance surrounding his return.
Lyra,
He whispered, voice rough from disuse during the extended projection. His hand reached toward her face with trembling uncertainty, exhaustion evident in each movement, yet determination overriding physical limitation.
I found you.
Confusion colored his expression as context gradually registered through exhaustion and disorientation. Garden setting rather than spiritual territory. Physical presence rather than spectral manifestation. A living woman rather than a disembodied soul. Yet certainty regarding her identity remained, despite the contextual incongruity. Recognition transcending rational explanation through deeper awareness than conscious thought could properly articulate.
You're alive.
He stated with wonder transcending confusion. Fingers finally making contact with her cheek in confirmation beyond visual perception.
Not spirit, but flesh. Not memory, but reality.
Yes.
She confirmed simply, her own hand rising to cover his where it rested against her face.
An elaborate deception.
His expression transformed through rapid succession of competing emotions. Confusion giving way to comprehension. Disbelief yielding to acceptance. Relief battling lingering fear from extended ordeal in dangerous territories.
I searched everywhere.
He whispered, each word carrying weight beyond its syllables.
Every realm where souls might transition following death. Every territory accessible to even reckless exploration.
I'm sorry.
Lyra said, genuine regret coloring her response despite the necessary deception their circumstances had required.
We attempted to send warning through Zara, but something prevented the message delivery before news reached you.
Understanding gradually replaced confusion as his mind reconnected more fully with physical reality and recent events acquired proper context rather than disjointed impression.
The marketplace spectacle.
He concluded, analytical function returning despite lingering exhaustion.
Convincing illusion rather than actual destruction.
Necessary deception to escape the necklace's binding.
She confirmed, the explanation providing a framework for understanding that his conscious mind could process despite the emotional impact still requiring deeper integration.
Temporary death to break the enchantment, and a public illusion to escape continued pursuit.
His hand remained against her cheek, physical contact providing continued reassurance that perception matched reality, rather than representing a desperate hallucination born from extended spiritual isolation.
I thought I'd lost you.
He admitted, the simple statement carrying emotional depth typically concealed beneath scholarly precision.
when our connection severed without warning, when witnesses described your apparent destruction.
You nearly lost yourself searching for what wasn't actually missing.
Lyra observed, concern evident as she noted a lingering translucence that indicated dangerously extended spiritual projection.
Your consciousness traveled territories few spirit seers willingly enter under any circumstances.
Cassius nodded once, acknowledgement without defense or explanation.
Worth any risk?
He said simply. The statement revealing prioritization beyond rational calculation or strategic assessment. Then, as if physical contact alone proved insufficient confirmation of her continued existence,
I need to...
The sentence remained unfinished as he leaned forward with uncharacteristic uncertainty, hesitation suggesting unprecedented territory, despite extensive experience navigating both physical and spiritual realms. Lyra recognized the question behind the movement, responding without words by closing the remaining distance between them to bring their lips together in confirmation beyond verbal explanation. The contact created resonance beyond their already established connection. A harmony previously glimpsed through magical working, now finding physical expression through direct intimacy that transcended rational understanding. Not a strategic alliance, but genuine affinity. Not a temporary alignment, but a recognized connection that had developed with unexpected speed, yet undeniable authenticity. Where their dream encounter had existed in a realm between consciousness and imagination, this contact occurred within material reality, where sensation carried physical dimension, absent from metaphysical interaction. His lips felt cool against hers, a consequence of extended spiritual projection rather than inherent temperature difference between their elemental affinities, yet gradually warmed as physical reality reasserted primacy over spectral extension. The kiss deepened with mutual recognition rather than unilateral initiation, neither dominating nor submitting, but harmonizing through shared exploration that respected boundaries while acknowledging desires previously unexamined amid crisis circumstances. His fingers threaded through her flame-red hair with gentle reverence that contradicted typical characterization of spirit seers as emotionally detached observers. Her hands, steadying his still weakened form with protective instinct, typically absent from fire mage's reputation for destructive potential. When they eventually separated, a necessity rather than preference dictating pause for breath, their physical forms still required despite the transcendent experience, something had fundamentally shifted between them. Not merely acknowledgement of attraction previously recognized without proper examination, but acceptance of significance beyond temporary alliance against common threat.
I love you.
Cassius stated with characteristic directness, the declaration unplanned yet absolute in its certainty.
Beyond rational explanation or strategic justification, beyond elemental affinity or guild separation. I love you with clarity I've never experienced regarding any other being or concept throughout my existence.
The statement hung between them. Vulnerability beyond anything their previous interactions had required. Exposure transcending professional collaboration or magical cooperation. Emotion typically constrained beneath scholarly precision, finding expression without qualification or limitation. Truth offered without expectation beyond acknowledgement of its existence.
I know.
Lyra replied with matching honesty, her response carrying acceptance beyond mere recognition.
I felt it through our connection even before conscious acknowledgement provided proper definition. Even while actively resisting implications, contradicting everything guild doctrine established regarding elemental compatibility.
Her hands framed his face with gentle precision, reflecting her magical specialty. Controlled touch rather than consuming heat. Appreciation rather than possession.
I love you too.
She continued, the simple declaration carrying significance beyond elaborate explanation.
Not despite our differences, but partially because of them. Not ignoring guild separation, but recognizing the artificial constraint.
The admission created space previously unavailable within their interactions. Permission to acknowledge connection beyond professional collaboration or temporary alliance against common threat. His arms encircled her with protective intent that respected rather than restricted, her body fitting against his with natural complementarity that suggested design rather than coincidence. Their second kiss carried different quality from the initial contact. Certainty replacing hesitation. Exploration informed by established permission rather than tentative questioning. His hands traced careful patterns along her back. Respectful heat gradually replacing spiritual coolness as physical form re-established normal temperature, following extended projection. Her fingers mapped scholarly features with artistic precision, memorizing contours typically observed from a respectful distance, rather than intimate proximity.
I nearly lost myself searching for your soul.
He murmured against her lips, the admission carrying vulnerability beyond scholarly detachment, typically associated with his guild affiliation.
I would have continued regardless of personal cost had your call not provided a pathway back to physical reality.
I nearly lost myself maintaining expected performance within arbitrary constraints.
She replied, equal honesty acknowledging parallel journey despite different manifestation.
I would have continued regardless of personal fulfillment, had circumstance not forced a recognition of alternatives beyond the predetermined path.
The garden alcove provided inadequate privacy for complete expression of newly acknowledged connection. Yet their mutual exhaustion, his from extended spiritual projection, hers from elaborate deception and subsequent rescue, limited immediate capacity for exploration beyond current boundaries. Yet within these constraints, their bodies gradually found alignment that physical limitation couldn't prevent despite social expectation or guild separation. His robes provided inadequate barrier between separated warmth, the fabric's movement creating whispered soundtrack to exploration conducted through increasingly intimate touch. Her flame-red hair cascaded across his shoulder, as her head found a resting place that seemed designed specifically for such purpose. His arms creating a protective circle that suggested sanctuary rather than constraint.
I want...
He began, desire evident yet restrained by respect that characterized his approach to all aspects of their interaction. The sentence remained deliberately unfinished. Invitation rather than demand. Acknowledgement of possibility without expectation of fulfillment.
I know,
She completed, understanding transcending verbal articulation through a connection established beyond physical interaction. Her hand traced delicate pattern across his chest. Touch both invitation and acceptance. Permission granted without reservation, yet tempered by practical awareness of current circumstances. Their bodies moved together with synchronicity, suggesting practice beyond actual experience. Alignment achieved through mutual attentiveness rather than technical expertise. Where traditional fire magic might have consumed through unrestricted passion, her approach offered controlled heat that enhanced rather than overwhelmed sensation. Where typical spirit magic might have observed without full participation, his engagement provided complete presence that experienced rather than merely witnessed intimate connection. The garden's natural boundaries provided cover without complete concealment. Privacy sufficient for exploration beyond public propriety, while maintaining necessary awareness of potential discovery. This shared vulnerability somehow enhanced rather than diminished their experience. Mutual risk accepted through deliberate choice rather than reckless abandonment. Decision consciously embraced despite potential consequences beyond immediate interaction. Fingers traced paths across previously unexplored territories, discovering responses unique to individual experience rather than conforming to generalized expectation. His touch found sensitivity behind her ear that generated unexpected cascade through otherwise controlled composure. Her caress located connection between shoulder and neck that produced reaction transcending scholarly reserve typically maintained regardless of circumstance. Their physical connection mirrored magical resonance previously established through formal working, harmonious alignment rather than competitive dominance, complementary interaction rather than hierarchical arrangement, fire and spirit, traditionally opposed, discovering unexpected compatibility through mutual exploration rather than forced integration or artificial separation. When their bodies finally joined completely, the connection carried significance beyond mere physical pleasure. Not simply flesh meeting flesh, but essence recognizing essence. Not merely satisfying natural desire, but acknowledging fundamental affinity that transcended guild categorization and social expectation alike. Their movement together followed natural rhythm rather than predetermined pattern, each response informing subsequent action through attentive awareness rather than selfish pursuit or passive submission. His scholarly precision finding expression through thorough appreciation rather than detached analysis. Her controlled precision manifesting as deliberate intensity rather than constrained limitation. The culmination arrived, not as conquest achieved, but as mutual discovery shared. Simultaneous recognition rather than sequential achievement. Harmonized experience rather than separate accomplishment. Their physical forms expressing what spiritual connection had already established beyond material limitation or social constraint. Fundamental compatibility despite apparent opposition. Natural resonance despite artificial separation. Afterward, as twilight deepened toward genuine night above their secluded alcove, reality gradually reasserted necessary consideration beyond immediate experience. Not regret replacing appreciation, but practical awareness returning alongside emotional significance. Not rejection of established connection, but recognition of continuing challenges beyond momentary alignment.
This complicates matters beyond previous parameters.
Cassius observed with a hint of scholarly detachment that couldn't quite conceal the deeper emotional resonance beneath the analytical assessment. His arms remained around her despite observation's practical implications. Body contradicting potential interpretation of statement as reluctance or withdrawal.
Understatement worthy of Spirit Guild diplomatic training.
Lyra replied with gentle humor that acknowledged the truth within observation, without assigning a negative interpretation to a practical recognition. Her head remained against his shoulder despite the acknowledgement of complications their connection represented. The garden's deepening shadows provided continued concealment while simultaneously highlighting necessity for more comprehensive planning than current situation permitted. His physical form required recovery following dangerously extended spiritual projection. Her disguised presence carried continued risk within city believing her dead. Their newly acknowledged connection faced opposition beyond immediate circumstance from multiple directions simultaneously.
We need to establish a secure location for proper recovery and strategic planning,
she said, her analytical mind engaging alongside the emotional acknowledgement rather than replacing genuine connection with mere practical consideration.
The catacombs provide short-term concealment, but the isolation prevents effective coordination.
Cassius nodded agreement. Scholars' minds similarly capable of maintaining multiple awareness simultaneously without diminishing significance of their intimate connection through necessary practical planning.
The Spirit Guild maintains safe houses beyond Pyreholm's boundaries,
he offered, the suggestion reflecting trust beyond professional collaboration.
locations unknown to Fire Guild authorities yet accessible through established channels.
The possibility represented a significant departure from the original planning, exposing her continued existence to individuals beyond carefully limited circle, initially established during hasty preparation. Yet circumstances had already evolved beyond the initial parameters through multiple unforeseen developments, requiring adaptation rather than rigid adherence to outdated strategy.
First, we need to locate Zara,
Lyra determined, concern for her friend's unexplained absence reasserting priority alongside newly established connection and necessary recovery.
Her failure to arrive at our rendezvous suggests a complication, requiring immediate address before considering longer-term arrangements.
Their bodies gradually separated with reluctance tempered by practical necessity rather than emotional withdrawal. Physical contact adjusted to accommodate required movement while maintaining the connection established beyond momentary alignment. His hand found hers with natural ease, suggesting practiced familiarity despite recent establishment. Fingers interlacing without conscious direction, as if completing a pattern that previously existed without physical manifestation.
Together,
He stated simply, the word carrying commitment beyond immediate circumstance or temporary alliance against common threat.
Together,
She confirmed with matching certainty, acceptance transcending guild separation and social expectation alike. Whatever challenges awaited beyond their garden sanctuary, whatever complications their connection represented within a rigid society, maintaining artificial separation where natural harmony might otherwise develop, whatever opposition Alek's thwarted plans might generate through wounded pride and frustrated ambition, they would face such obstacles as united force rather than isolated individuals. The realization provided a foundation beyond any momentary alignment or temporary respite from the ongoing crisis. Not naive expectation of simple resolution, but committed partnership against complex challenges. Not unrealistic disregard for practical difficulties, but shared determination. Overcoming artificial limitations through genuine connection. As night claimed Pyreholm completely, two figures departed a garden alcove with careful coordination that suggested long-established partnership rather than recent association. Fire and spirit moving in harmonious alignment that contradicted centuries of enforced separation through a simple demonstration of complementary potential previously denied through artificial constraint. Night cloaked Pyreholm in shadows, the city's usual bright illumination subdued in apparent mourning for the High Councilor's daughter. Lyra observed this from the garden's edge, her hand still firmly clasped in Cassius's as they prepared to venture beyond their momentary sanctuary.
We need better disguises if we're going to move through the city together,
she whispered, already calculating the magical requirements for sustained illusion covering two people rather than just herself.
Mine was effective but basic. With both our skills combined, we could create something that would withstand even careful scrutiny.
Cassius nodded, his scholarly mind engaging despite the lingering effects of his spirit-walking ordeal.
A paired working,
He suggested.
Your illusion providing visual deception, while my spirit manipulation creates subtle perception shift, not just changing how we appear, but how others perceive our presence entirely.
The collaborative approach represented exactly the kind of elemental harmonization traditional guild separation had declared impossible. Fire and spirit magics not merely coexisting, but actively enhancing each other's effectiveness. Lyra felt a flutter of excitement that transcended their immediate practical concerns, glimpsing future possibilities where such collaboration might become normalized rather than forbidden.
Sir, I'll create the visual framework,
She began, her hands already weaving the preliminary patterns for advanced illusion.
If you can layer the perceptual shift within that structure,
Our magics will align at the intersection.
He completed, violet eyes clearing further as focused magical work helped re-establish his normal precision.
Creating a complementary effect beyond either individual capacity.
They worked with synchronized movements that suggested long practice despite their relatively brief acquaintance. Her flame manipulation forming detailed visual framework, while his spirit techniques infused the construct with subtle influence affecting how observers would process what they perceived. Not merely changed appearance, but altered presence. Not simply disguised features, but modified impression left upon casual observers. When the working completed, they stood transformed. Not as fire magister and spirit seer, but as an unremarkable mercantile couple from Pyreholm's trading district. The disguise presented perfect social invisibility, the kind of people seen daily, yet never truly noticed, present without drawing attention, visible without inspiring memory.
Remarkable.
Cassius murmured, examining their transformed appearance in the garden fountain's reflective surface.
The integration is seamless. Your illusion provides foundation, while my influence creates perceptual deflection. Anyone looking directly at us will physically see the disguise, but their attention will naturally slide away unless deliberately focused.
together we've created something neither could achieve alone.
Lyra observed, the simple truth carrying implications beyond their immediate tactical advantage. She pushed this broader significance aside for the moment, focusing on immediate objectives.
First priority, finding Zara. Her absence from our rendezvous point suggests serious complication.
The logical starting point would be her residence.
Cassius suggested, already orienting himself within Pyreholm's familiar layout.
Though direct approach carries obvious risks if she's under official observation.
Lyra shook her head slightly, intuition providing alternative direction.
If she were simply confined at home, she would have found a way to send a message through household staff. Her complete silence suggests more formal restrictions.
The questioning chambers.
Cassius concluded, mind following her reasoning with practiced efficiency.
Where guild authorities conduct official investigations.
Decision made with characteristic efficiency, they moved from the garden's protective shadows into Pyreholm's streets. Their disguises functioned perfectly. Passers-by glancing at them without truly seeing, eyes sliding away with natural disinterest rather than deliberate avoidance. The combined working maintained itself with minimal conscious reinforcement, allowing them to conserve magical energy while navigating toward the administrative quarter. As they walked, Lyra found herself acutely aware of Cassius beside her, their shoulders occasionally brushing, hands finding each other with unconscious frequency. Physical connection maintained despite practical focus on immediate objectives. Something had fundamentally changed between them. A boundary crossed that couldn't be re-established, even if circumstances might eventually demand reconsideration.
What are you thinking?
He asked quietly, perception apparently extending to her emotional state despite their focus on external concerns.
About us.
She admitted with uncharacteristic directness.
About what happens after the immediate crisis resolves. If it resolves. About possibilities previously unimagined.
His hand tightened slightly around hers, acknowledgement without interrupting her thoughts. Encouraged by this silent support, Lyra continued expressing considerations previously confined to private reflection.
I've been wondering what life might look like beyond guild separation,
she said softly as they navigated less populated side streets.
A world where fire and spirit aren't considered inherently incompatible, but potentially complementary. Where what we've discovered together might become normalized rather than forbidden.
You're imagining a fundamental restructuring of Eldervale's magical society.
Cassius observed, though his tone carried consideration rather than dismissal.
Revolution rather than mere personal exception.
Is that impossibly idealistic?
She asked, vulnerability showing through the scholarly analysis that typically characterized her approach to complex problems.
Idealistic, certainly.
He acknowledged.
Impossible. History suggests otherwise. Guild separation itself was a constructed system rather than a natural development, created through political decision rather than inevitable magical necessity. What was made can potentially be unmade, or at least significantly modified.
The assessment offered neither false reassurance nor discouraging rejection. Balanced evaluation that respected both possibility and challenge, inherent in such fundamental change. Another example of what drew her to him. A willingness to engage with complex questions without either patronizing simplification or self-protective dismissal.
I can imagine it,
she admitted as they approached the administrative quarters' formal boundaries.
Us, together, without hiding, teaching others what we've discovered about elemental harmony. Perhaps even a home where both fire and spirit elements coexist without conflict. A warm hearth alongside a spirit garden. Bright windows with quiet meditation spaces.
The domestic image surprised her with its clarity and emotional resonance. A specific visualization beyond abstract consideration. A particular desire rather than a general possibility. Not merely a theoretical revolution, but a personal aspiration. Not only societal transformation, but an individual life shared beyond current constraints.
I see it too.
Cassius replied, unexpected softness in his voice revealing a similar consideration had occupied his typically analytical mind.
A life where our differences enhance rather than restrict, where opposing elements create balance rather than conflict.
Their shared vision hung between them. A possibility glimpsed beyond the immediate crisis. A future imagined despite present danger. Neither dismissed its significance nor allowed it to distract them from current objectives. Both acknowledged its importance while maintaining necessary focus on immediate concerns. As they reached the administrative quarters perimeter, conversation shifted back to tactical considerations. The area's increased security required careful navigation, guild guards maintaining heightened vigilance following the dramatic events in the marketplace. Officials moving with purpose that suggested an ongoing investigation beyond routine activity.
We approach from the service entrance rather than main gates,
Lyra suggested, her familiarity with administrative procedures providing tactical advantage.
The questioning chambers are accessible through a secondary corridor, designed for staff movement without disturbing official proceedings.
Cassius nodded agreement, adjusting their path to circle around toward a less monitored access point. Their disguises continued functioning perfectly, though they maintained careful distance from any guards with specialized magical training that might potentially detect a sophisticated illusion despite its dual-natured construction. The service entrance presented minimal challenge. Delivery workers moving supplies through a practical access point with efficiency prioritized over security concerns. Their disguises blended perfectly with this working environment. Their apparent purpose aligned with their actual movement through a carefully structured environment where function typically overrode formal protocol. Navigating internal corridors required greater caution. The administrative staff more alert to unauthorized presence than external delivery personnel. Officials potentially recognizing inconsistencies despite the perceptual deflection their disguise incorporated. They moved with practiced confidence that discouraged closer inspection, walking as if they belonged while maintaining awareness of potential challenges should their deception be questioned. The questioning chambers occupied a dedicated wing within the administrative complex. Specialized rooms designed for information gathering rather than punitive confinement. Comfort balanced against security to encourage cooperation from those with valuable knowledge rather than criminal culpability. Determining Zara's specific location within this complex presented the next significant challenge in their increasingly improvised rescue attempt.
Observation alcove,
Lyra whispered, indicating a discrete architectural feature designed to allow authorized officials to monitor proceedings without direct participation.
It provides an overview of the active chambers without requiring formal access credentials.
The space proved perfect for their purposes, positioned above the main questioning rooms with visibility into multiple chambers simultaneously, designed for unobtrusive observation rather than active participation in the proceedings below. Their disguises maintained effectiveness even here. Staff moving through the monitoring area with attention focused on the chambers below, rather than on colleagues presumably authorized for similar observation. From this vantage point, they quickly located Zara. visible through an observation window in a chamber designated for cooperative witnesses rather than hostile interrogation. She appeared physically unharmed, though visibly frustrated, pacing her limited confines with energy suggesting involuntary restriction, rather than willing participation in extended questioning.
Not formally charged, but definitely confined.
Cassius observed quietly, scholarly assessment providing framework for understanding her current status.
Cooperative detention rather than punitive imprisonment.
They're keeping her isolated to prevent communication.
Lyra concluded, her analytical mind identifying the tactical purpose beyond the legal justification.
Which means they suspect something but lack confirming evidence.
Further observation revealed additional significant information. Rotation of officials entering the chamber for periodic questioning suggested investigation coordinated at highest levels, with direct oversight from guild leadership rather than delegated to subordinate investigators. Most concerning was the occasional appearance of Alek himself. His questions apparently focused on specific details regarding Lyra's final days, rather than general information about her activities or associates.
He suspects but doesn't know,
Lyra whispered, watching her former fiancé conduct another brief interrogation session before departing with visible frustration.
Still trying to confirm whether my death was genuine or an elaborately staged deception.
His uncertainty works to our advantage.
Cassius noted.
But Zara's continued confinement prevents a coordinated response to his investigation.
They observed for nearly an hour, gathering critical intelligence regarding both Zara's condition and the broader investigation's current focus. The most valuable information came through pattern recognition rather than specific conversations. The official's body language, questioning frequency, topics apparently revisited with particular intensity, all revealing investigation priorities.
We need to know how my father is responding to all this,
Lyra decided as they finally departed the observation alcove, having confirmed Zara's immediate safety, if not her freedom.
His reaction will significantly impact whatever counter-strategy we develop.
Navigating from the administrative complex to the High Councilor's residence required traversing Pyreholm's central districts. Areas currently filled with public mourning displays following news of Lyra's apparent death. The experience proved surreal. Observing citizens expressing grief for a tragedy that hadn't actually occurred. Witnessing elaborate memorial preparations for someone watching those very arrangements from disguised anonymity.
Strange to see one's own funeral being planned,
she murmured as they passed artisans constructing a ceremonial flame archway for the upcoming memorial service. The massive structure would eventually contain an eternal flame dedicated to her memory. A permanent monument to a tragedy that existed only as elaborate deception rather than genuine loss.
Perspective few ever experience.
Cassius acknowledged, his hand finding hers with increased frequency as they navigated these emotional complications. His touch provided grounding presence amidst the disorienting circumstances. Connection to authentic reality beyond the constructed appearances surrounding them. The High Councilor's residence stood distinguished yet somber within Pyreholm's elite district. Ceremonial flames at the entrance reduced to their mourning configuration that signaled family tragedy rather than political function. Guards maintained an increased perimeter, though their attention focused outward toward potential public intrusion. rather than suspicious scrutiny of delivery personnel approaching a service entrance with appropriate timing and apparent purpose.
My father maintains a private study connected to the residential wing.
Lyra explained as they navigated the familiar service corridors with confidence born from a lifetime of experience moving through these spaces.
He retreats there during personal crisis, rather than using official chambers within guild headquarters.
Finding this private sanctuary proved simple, despite the enhanced security throughout the residence. Lyra's intimate knowledge of the family spaces providing efficient navigation through areas typically restricted to household staff and family members. Their disguises continued functioning perfectly, deflecting casual attention while preventing closer scrutiny that might have revealed sophisticated deception beneath apparent ordinariness. They located Lyra Embersong exactly where Lyra had predicted, seated within his private study surrounded by family artifacts rather than official documentation. The High Councilor's normally imposing presence appeared diminished through visible grief. Shoulders slumped beneath formal robes that suddenly seemed to weigh upon him rather than enhance his natural authority. Before him stood a small portrait. Lyra recognized her own image painted several years earlier for the official family gallery, now placed on his private desk rather than the public display wall.
He's genuinely grieving,
she whispered, unexpected emotion constricting her throat as she observed her father's private mourning beyond political performance. Whatever complicated relationship existed between them, his current suffering appeared authentic rather than calculated demonstration for potential observers.
We could tell him the truth.
Cassius suggested quietly, sensitivity belying the typical characterization of spirit seers as emotionally detached observers.
End his suffering with simple explanation.
Lyra considered the possibility briefly before reluctantly shaking her head.
Too dangerous while Alek maintains close observation. My father's political experience makes him an excellent strategist, but a terrible actor. His changed behavior would immediately alert Alek to the deception.
They maintained observation from their concealed position long enough to gather additional critical intelligence, particularly when Alek himself arrived for an apparent condolence visit that quickly transformed into thinly disguised interrogation. The exchange revealed a significant development in their complex situation. Doran clearly harbored serious suspicions regarding Alek's involvement in his daughter's apparent death, yet maintained political restraint rather than open accusation without confirming evidence.
You seem remarkably interested in specific details of the investigation, Lord Brightforge.
Doran observed with deceptive mildness that barely concealed the dangerous undercurrent beneath his diplomatic phrasing.
Almost as if searching for particular confirmation rather than general information.
Merely seeking closure, High Councilor.
Alek replied with equally careful navigation between apparent concern and actual purpose.
Understanding exactly what happened to my beloved might help process this terrible loss.
The exchange continued with increasing tension beneath ceremonial courtesy. Grieving father and bereaved fiancé maintaining formal protocol, while clearly harboring significant mutual suspicion beyond expressed condolences. Most revealing was the brief exchange regarding the recovered necklace. Alek's persistent questions about its conditions suggesting particular concern beyond sentimental attachment to recovered keepsake.
The artifact appears completely undamaged despite the catastrophic energy release that apparently consumed its wearer.
Doran noted with pointed precision that revealed his own suspicions regarding this inconsistency.
Curious physical resilience given reported circumstances.
Magical metallurgy often produces unexpected durability.
Alek responded with scholarly deflection that avoided addressing the specific incongruity the observation had highlighted.
I would be grateful to have it returned. Sentimental value beyond any academic interest, naturally.
Of course.
Doran agreed with Diplomat's precision.
Once the investigation concludes and evidence processing completes, procedure requires thorough documentation before releasing potential artifacts, even to family members.
The interaction confirmed important tactical information. The necklace remained secured within the investigation rather than returned to Alek's possession, while Doran maintained sufficient suspicion to ensure procedural delays prevented immediate access, despite apparent legitimacy of request. This development provided unexpected advantage in their increasingly complicated situation. The dangerous artifact, temporarily contained beyond Alek's direct control, while the investigation proceeded without definitive conclusion regarding Lyra's actual fate. When they finally departed the High Councilor's residence, having gathered critical intelligence without detection despite heightened security throughout the family compound, Lyra felt a curious mixture of emotional responses to the witnessed events. Relief regarding the investigation's current status competed with concern for her father's genuine suffering.
We have what we need,
she said as they navigated back toward the city's less monitored districts. Night had deepened around them. Festival activities subdued through apparent respect for the tragedy affecting guild leadership.
Zara, confined but unharmed. My father suspicious but maintaining political caution. Alek uncertain but investigating aggressively.
And the necklace secured beyond his immediate access.
Cassius added, identifying perhaps the most significant tactical advantage their observation had confirmed.
Creating opportunity for potential intervention before he regains possession.
The summary provided foundation for strategic planning. Current situation assessed with clarity beyond emotional response or wishful interpretation. Yet practical considerations competed with personal awareness as they continued moving through darkened streets toward the catacomb entrance where temporary safety awaited beyond public scrutiny.
I'm sorry about your father,
Cassius said quietly as they navigated the final approach to the ancient maintenance tunnel providing access to the underground sanctuary.
His suffering is genuine.
The simple acknowledgement addressed the emotional complexity beneath tactical considerations. Recognition of personal cost beyond strategic necessity. Empathy transcending analytical assessment to address the human dimension, their planning necessarily incorporated, but couldn't fully resolve through practical measures alone.
Thank you,
Lyra replied. Gratitude extending beyond specific observation to encompass broader understanding his perspective consistently demonstrated. Another quality drawing her toward him despite traditional separation their guilds maintained. Capacity for comprehensive perception, incorporating emotional alongside analytical assessment, rather than prioritizing one exclusive framework for understanding complex situations. The catacomb entrance appeared exactly as she remembered. Maintenance access point disguised within ordinary architectural features, designed for practical function rather than aesthetic appeal or security concern. Their disguises maintained effectiveness even as they slipped from public street into concealed passage. The illusion finally dismissed only after the heavy door closed behind them with reassuring solidity. As the magical construct dissolved around them, returning original appearances with physical relief following extended deception, Lyra felt the weight of accumulated tension release through a long exhale that carried both stress and momentary liberation in equal measure. Beside her, Cassius experienced similar release, his shoulders relaxing as the magical effort of maintaining sophisticated disguise finally concluded after hours of continuous subtle exertion.
We should reach the ritual chamber before discussing strategy,
she suggested, practical concern for security overriding immediate desire for substantive conversation regarding everything they had discovered.
Sound carries strangely through these passages, echoes reaching unexpected distances.
Cassius nodded agreement, following her lead through winding corridors with trust transcending normal caution regarding unfamiliar territory. His confidence in her guidance represented another aspect of their developing relationship, respect demonstrated through action, rather than merely expressed through words. The journey through ancient catacombs proceeded in companionable silence, not uncomfortable absence requiring verbal interruption, but shared quiet containing mutual understanding beyond explicit articulation. Their hands remained connected throughout passage through darkened corridors, physical contact maintaining link established through more profound connection during garden encounter hours earlier. When they finally reached the ritual chamber, circular space providing temporary sanctuary beyond detection from those believing Lyra dead, both experienced momentary respite from constant vigilance necessary while moving through potentially hostile territory. Here, at least briefly, they could exist without disguise or deception. Authentic presence rather than constructed appearance. Genuine connection rather than tactical alliance.
We should develop response strategy immediately,
Lyra stated, her analytical mind already organizing information gathered during extended observation mission.
Current circumstance provides temporary advantage, but Alek's investigation will eventually.
Her strategic assessment remained uncompleted as Cassius closed the distance between them with unexpected swiftness, his hands framing her face with gentle precision that belied the urgent movement bringing them together. Words gave way to more direct communication as his lips found hers with certainty transcending verbal explanation. Connection re-established beyond theoretical planning or tactical consideration. The kiss carried different quality from the garden encounter. Not desperate reunion after feared permanent separation, but conscious choice following deliberate reflection. Not impulse born from overwhelming emotion, but decision informed by considered evaluation. His touch communicated commitment beyond momentary alignment or opportunistic connection. Her response conveyed acceptance, transcending temporary circumstance or strategic collaboration. When they eventually separated, something had solidified between them beyond initial recognition or preliminary exploration. Not merely attraction acknowledged or potential identified, but possibility embraced despite complications.
We should,
Lyra began, attempting to refocus on strategic planning despite continued awareness of his proximity and its effect on her concentration.
Develop a counter-strategy.
Cassius completed, similar struggle evident in violet eyes that maintained contact with her amber gaze, despite conscious effort to engage analytical rather than emotional faculties. His hands remained at her waist, neither advancing intimate connection nor establishing professional distance.
Zara's confinement presents immediate concern.
She continued, moving reluctantly toward the chamber's central area where planning might proceed with minimal distraction.
Without her coordination, our original strategy lacks essential communication component with potential allies above.
While your father's suspicions suggest potential assistance if properly approached,
He added, following her lead while maintaining proximity that suggested reluctance to unnecessary separation despite practical focus on tactical considerations. His hand found hers again, contact apparently unconscious rather than deliberately initiated. Their strategic discussion proceeded with professional efficiency, despite periodic interruption when analytical focus yielded momentarily to personal awareness. Sentences occasionally remaining incomplete when eye contact extended beyond tactical communication. Planning sequences sometimes pausing when physical proximity temporarily overrode strategic consideration. Each time, they would acknowledge momentary diversion with subtle humor, rather than embarrassed withdrawal. Accepting rather than resisting natural oscillation between different aspects of their developing relationship.
This isn't very efficient.
Lyra observed after another unplanned interruption when theoretical discussion of potential approaches to Zara's situation transformed into brief but intense physical connection neither had consciously initiated. Her observation carried amusement rather than frustration, acceptance rather than resistance to the pattern their planning session had established.
different priorities competing for limited attention.
Cassius agreed. Scholarly precision somehow maintaining itself despite obvious personal investment in the continuing interruptions to their strategic planning.
Though efficiency isn't always optimal for complex situations involving multiple significant considerations.
The observation represented another example of perspective drawing her toward him. Capacity for balanced assessment, incorporating different value systems rather than rigidly applying single standard across complex circumstances. Not merely accepting interruption, but recognizing legitimate competing priority.
Perhaps a compromise approach.
She suggested, practical solution emerging from her analytical mind that continued functioning despite emotional engagement occurring simultaneously.
Alternate focused planning with scheduled breaks, addressing other significant aspects of our current situation.
His expression conveyed appreciation beyond simple agreement. Recognition of balanced solution rather than binary choice between competing priorities. Their planning proceeded more effectively following this structural adjustment. Dedicated attention to strategic development, punctuated by intentional periods addressing personal connection. The approach proved surprisingly productive. Each aspect receiving appropriate focus without unnecessary competition for limited attention. By early morning, they had developed comprehensive response strategy incorporating everything discovered during extended observation mission. Zara's situation would be addressed through carefully coordinated legal intervention rather than direct extraction. Pressure applied through appropriate channels, emphasizing improper detention without specific charges.
Legitimate process requiring minimal magical intervention.
Cassius noted approvingly as this component reached completion.
reducing risk while potentially achieving necessary objective through established channels rather than additional deception or direct confrontation.
The necklace presented more complicated challenge. Secured beyond Alek's immediate access, yet still containing dangerous entity that had attempted consuming Lyra's soul during their previous encounter. Physical destruction might release rather than eliminate the threat, while continued existence represented ongoing danger should Alek eventually regain possession through persistent effort or political pressure.
Containment rather than confrontation at this stage.
Lyra determined after examining various approaches with characteristic thoroughness.
My father's suspicion provides temporary security, while we develop more permanent solution addressing fundamental threat.
Throughout their strategic planning, the emotional connection between them continued developing alongside tactical collaboration, their personal relationship expanding beyond initial recognition to incorporate deeper understanding and mutual appreciation discovered through extended interaction. Each scheduled break from strategic development provided opportunity for further exploration of their magical resonance, but increasingly manifesting through physical action.
Do you really believe it's possible?
Lyra asked during one such interlude, their physical proximity providing for deeper conversation.
What we imagined earlier. Life beyond guild separation. Partnership across elemental boundaries. Home incorporating both traditions rather than maintaining artificial division.
Cassius considered the question with characteristic thoroughness, neither dismissing possibility through practical limitation, nor embracing idealistic vision without realistic assessment of challenges such development would necessarily face within existing social structures.
Possible yet difficult.
He concluded, his analytical precision balanced against desire for positive outcome.
Requiring significant adjustment to established systems, revolution rather than accommodation, though perhaps evolutionary rather than sudden transformation.
The assessment acknowledged both possibility and challenge, neither discouraging pursuit through emphasis on difficulty, nor encouraging unrealistic expectation through exclusive focus on potential benefit. Another example of balanced perspective she increasingly valued within their developing relationship.
Worth pursuing despite difficulties.
She stated with quiet certainty that reflected growing commitment.
Indeed.
He agreed, formal acknowledgement carrying emotional resonance. His hand found hers with natural ease, physical connection mirroring conceptual alignment their conversation had identified.
We should rest.
Lyra suggested, practical consideration for physical needs temporarily set aside during extended planning session, now reasserting priority as immediate strategic development reached natural pause.
Implementing our response strategy will require full capacity.
Cassius nodded agreement. Yet physical necessity competed with personal desire as they arranged limited bedding available within ritual chamber. Practical arrangement requiring proximity, despite potential distractions such closeness might create.
This presents certain challenges regarding necessary rest versus other considerations.
He observed with scholarly detachment, belied by violet eyes maintaining contact with her amber gaze, suggesting different priority than practical concern his statement had articulated.
Indeed.
Lyra acknowledged. Formal response carrying informal meaning beyond explicit content. Her hand remained in his despite preparation for rest.
Perhaps compromise approach similar to planning strategy? Addressing multiple significant considerations through balanced allocation rather than exclusive focus on single priority?
His smile transformed serious features into something unexpectedly warm. Genuine appreciation rather than calculated response.
Logical extension of our previously effective methodology.
He agreed. As they settled into arrangement, balancing necessary rest against continuous contact, neither seemed willing to surrender. Lyra found herself returning to vision glimpsed earlier during their journey through Pyreholm's darkened streets. Not merely theoretical possibility, but increasingly tangible aspiration. Home incorporating both traditions rather than maintaining artificial separation. Partnership across elemental boundaries rather than enforced division. Life beyond guild constraints rather than within established limitations. Possibility requiring significant effort, yet worthy of investment beyond immediate return. The vision remained incomplete. Detail requiring further development. Implementation facing substantial challenge. Realization demanding significant transformation beyond personal exception or individual accommodation. Yet its core represented authentic aspiration rather than unrealistic fantasy. As sleep gradually claimed her consciousness despite competing awareness of Cassius beside her, his presence simultaneously comforting and distracting, calming and stimulating in equal measure, Lyra maintained connection to this vision of home. Together, they had already demonstrated possibility beyond traditional expectation. Fire and spirit creating harmony rather than conflict. Opposed elements generating cooperation rather than competition. Different traditions producing complementary effect rather than mutual destruction. Small demonstration potentially expanding to larger application. Her final thought before consciousness yielded completely to necessary sleep, followed this progression to logical conclusion. Revolution beginning with single spark rather than coordinated conflagration. Together, they had already ignited that initial spark. What followed remained uncertain yet increasingly possible. Potential awaiting development rather than mere theory requiring validation. Not guaranteed outcome, but legitimate possibility. Future worth pursuing despite difficulty. Together.